How are you? Great. Thank you so much for coming to our second Coffee and Conversations. I am going to videotape. This morning I had a request from a parent who's working and would like to see if we can get it on the website. So we're going to try to see if we can make that work. Also next month, I think October the 15th is the date, it's a Monday, we're going to have an evening conversations and it'll be dessert and dialogue. To accommodate, I had a request from several dads who'd like to attend who are working and a couple of working moms, so we'll do another one and keep it pretty similar so there won't be different information going in different places. It'll just be a combination of today and the last one. And so if you're interested or you know who it might be or other neighbors, let them know. I'll post it on the website, I'll do a dial out, I'll probably have it on the marquee as well so you'll know when it's coming. But just go ahead and mark the calendar for that. So super excited this morning to be able to present Common Core information. We've heard about it since last spring and it's a scary word. Common Core, what are we doing? What's different with the curriculum? And so I have Margaret Moss here who is the K-5 math supervisor. When she starts talking, you're going to enjoy her because she's got a little bit of an accent. So we love that.
It's always so strange because I actually think you have the accent.
So she's fantastic. We were going to have Diana Denton, who is the ELA supervisor here. You know, a district this large, we have issues that pop up all the time, so she unexpectedly had to be somewhere else. But Margaret is going to do the full presentation, so you'll get ELA and math information as well, and then we'll try our hardest to answer any questions that you have, or just at the end, any other conversations that you want to bring up. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Margaret.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. It's always nice to be here and see people and be able to talk to them and allay some of the fears that people are feeling about Common Core, because it's something that you're reading about and you're seeing and the teachers talk about it, but you don't actually always know what does it mean for me. So today we're going to run through a few things for you, and the one, let's see if I can use that way, yes. I wanted to give you a bit of background. So all of this was given to our teachers already. So our teachers have more information, but it's about time that we told our parents. And so what we're talking about is that this is why this came about. And we asked ourselves, why are we doing this now? Patrice, can I just stand on this side?
Yes, the lights. Okay.
The reading here. So I'm a left-handed person, and you're always a bit odd when you're left-handed. Well, that's what they tell me. I sort of think it's normal, but still, we're back to the same old. So we had to talk about why are these standards coming down, and really one of the greatest things is about the mobility of the workforce in the United States. We've got a lot of people moving. You may even be somebody that's moved down here for a job for a reason. Your husband had a job, or you've even had a job down here, and you had to come down and move the whole family. And so we have a whole lot of movement. Plus we have global competition. And that's a big thing right now, and if you're reading any of the news, you'll see that that's something that's coming up all the time. So when we look at that, we say, all right, so why is it that American schools, because there's this thing out there that American schools are not doing very well. That is not actually true. The schools in the United States are improving. We are getting better. We are teaching things the right way. We are changing the way we do things. But the problem is that the world is changing faster than us. For example, 5 years ago, when my little grandchild was born, I thought I knew everything. She can now handle the iPad far better than I can. And she's only just turning 5. So I'm concerned that I'm actually standing still and they are doing the moving. And so that's really what the problem is with our schools. We have done things that we're doing well, but the children are moving along faster. That what they're picking up and what they're learning is much quicker than we give them credit for. So why is this important? And these are the reasons why. And I hope that you don't object if I don't read a PowerPoint. I find it eternally irritating when somebody reads to me when I can look at it for myself. So I'm just going to give you some pieces about it. So really what we're going to have to do, this is how it affects our teachers, our students, and then it affects you as the parents. Because most of you have been out there in the workforce, you have competed with the other people in the workforce, and it is now much more difficult for people to get jobs. And it's not necessarily college-bound people. It's anybody out there is having a difficult time. So here's why we're going to be going on. So this is what happened. The states got together And the governors got together and they said, let's do something about getting some kind of unity amongst the United States. So they developed these Common Core standards, and they've done it for ELA and math. And so one of the things that you really need to bear in mind is that load on those poor teachers now. Those elementary teachers, which are the only ones affected by this, because in the middle and high school, you get an English teacher only or a math teacher only, but they are not teaching both content areas. But at the elementary level, these people are having to learn two massive curricula because they are doing both of those content areas at the same time. So now we have to focus on what do we want the children to learn, and we are far more focused on how this affects the children, and the children have to have autonomy in their learning as well than in the past. The days of us sitting still where the teacher just talked to you are finished. So when we look at this, then we say, okay, right now we've got 45 states and 3 territories that have accepted the Common Core. So these people are doing it. There are 2 holdouts. They will be always the same 2 holdouts, I'm sure you could guess. One of them will be Texas, and one of them will be California. And actually, as an aside for you to know, that in the old days when people wrote textbooks, textbook companies, they checked out California and Texas first, and then the rest of us got whatever they thought we would need after those 2 states have decided what they like. So that's where we are right now within the United States. So going forward for that, these are the standards. We are asking our teachers to teach fewer things, to spend longer on it, and to be able to have rigorous pieces. The days when we would all get the same old worksheet that maybe we downloaded from the internet and every child gets it, we have to start changing those practices. Because now we need to look at what does the child need that's for that specific child. What are those needs for that child? Now we're not talking about writing individual lesson plans for each child, because right now, as you will realize, your children are probably in a class that's larger than the ones that they've had in the past. So we can't do that. So we have to look at the ways that we're going to work with that in the area. So we have to build upon everything that we have. And so all of these standards have been based upon what the experts think that the students need to learn in both ELA and mathematics. So I can speak a little bit about the ELA. I'm not the expert of ELA, I do the math. But I do know that here's where the main thing is, because this comes into mathematics as well. The complex texts. And so when we talk about the text complexity, we are not talking about using bigger words, longer words, more complicated words, using a thesaurus the whole time. What we're talking about is the way it's phrased. So the words may be understood. I'll give you an example. In England, for example, we would say chalk and cheese, and my husband says, I understand the words, I have no idea what it means. And it really means when it's an opposite of something. So those words are simple, but they're difficult for people to understand if you're not used to it. So that's what we're talking about here. So the whole focus is talking about college and careers. We are not saying, or the people that wrote the standards are not saying that everybody needs to have a college-bound piece. But you need to have all the skills that are required for a career and for college. So those must be fitting all people. In the past, we really only concentrated on the children going to college. But nowadays, there are people, for example, let's talk about Microsoft or something like that. They don't need a college degree necessarily to earn a huge amount of money, but they certainly need computer skills. And so that's the kind of idea that is being set behind all of the ELA and the math standards. They have to combine science and social studies into the ELA as well. So when your children get assessed, they will get assessed on ELA, what we call an integrated piece for ELA science and social studies. It does also mean that the actual lab, for example, in science, or a heavy-seated training in social studies would be done outside that ELA block. But maybe reading a text, they will use a science text. Maybe when they teach reading for information, they're looking at a social studies text. But the actual content of that is not taught during English language arts, if that makes sense to everybody. So from there, we said, all right, here's an example. Underneath the GPS, so we call this last year. So this is just one piece I'm going to read to you, because if you read the first paragraph, my mother works as a waitress in the Blue Tile Diner. After school, sometimes I go to meet her there. Then her boss, Josephine, gives me a job too. So probably the most difficult word in that may be waitress or Josephine if you're not an English speaker. But for most of us, or children, at second and third grade, they would be able to handle that. But now underneath the Common Core, here's an example of it. I wiped my hands on my apron and went to the window. Outside, the prairie reached out and touched the places where the sky came down. There's not one difficult word in there, but the phraseology is that image of how the sky meets the land is clear for us as adults, but not so clear if you're a second or third grader in school right now. So that's what we mean about the text complexity. So that's the kind of thing you'll see. So you're not going to give them a huge word in third grade and expect them to know that, but it's just the way it's all phrased. So that's how the ELA has bumped itself up. It's become more rigorous. So all of the things we should see in ELA and all of the things that we see in maths should be more rigorous over time. Now we're not going to be there yet, and I need you to all know that this year is a learning year for everybody, not just Carl. So we can't expect our teachers to be right there on it at the top of their game this year. This is going to take time. This is going to take 3, 4, 5 years as we roll into this so that everybody understands the depth to what they need, to which they need to go to support your children. So here's an example of informational text. Now informational text is where the literacy comes across into mathematics. We have it as informational. We don't write stories as such. We call them stories for the younger grades, but it's informative. You need to know what's going on in the problem so that you can solve it, but we can kind of make it a little story if we can. But in the old days, and when I say old days, I'm talking about last year, where it's GPS. If you looked at third grade, the amount of informational text in third grade under the GPS was 20%. But now it's 50. So in other words, the children are reading far more informational pieces than they are stories. So the stories would be probably outside the language arts block, what they would read at home when they come into the library and they choose a book that they'd like to read. That's where you're going to get the story piece of it. But have a look how it jumps up into the 12th grade. Informational text should be 70% in the 12th grade. And that is because a lot of things, for example, my husband is actually a nuclear engineer, but when I ask him to do something like put a chair together, he wants to do it without looking at the manual. So eventually he has to go to the manual, and if you've ever looked at a manual, even a simple one for assembling an office chair, there are directions on there that are pretty high level. And so that's what we mean when children are getting up to be 12th grade. They need to be able to understand what it is when it's not just about regurgitating an answer or read the story, tell me what's happening in the story, that they've got to be able to figure out. And I know for myself that if I have to look at the manual that's usually quite thick if it comes with a computer or something like this, and even allowing for the fact that it's in different languages, I still think, oh, I don't know if I can actually want to do this. Let me find somebody else who's done it before and doesn't need to look. So when we come here, we go to math now. So that's just a brief overview of the ELA, and I'm sorry I can't go further into detail with it, but Diana will be able to, and she'll be able to talk to Patrice, and she'll be able to say that. In the math, this is what we focus on in the K5. So I need to let you know that in mathematics, we are building concepts from K through 5, so that when your child hits the 6th grade, they should be able to use all of those properties, those different pieces there, and go forth with the new material that they are learning. What we can't have is people who go up into the 6th grade and they don't understand how multiplication comes about, they don't understand how to do it, they don't get when they have to do it. Those are all the things that we need to work on at the elementary level. As you can see in the 6th through 8th standards, they're going up higher to those things right now. And if you have questions about 6th through 8, my partner, Michelle Mikes, she runs the 6th through 12 program for mathematics, and she would be happy to answer any questions you might have if you've got children that are in high school or going into middle school or in middle school. So, This is the most favorite word amongst every teacher, assessment. It brings out hives, brown paper bags that people breathe into, and all sorts of things happen because it's very stressful. And it's not just stressful for the children and the teacher, it's stressful for you too. Because you're trying to support your child at home who may be not understanding something and then will have the temper fit that they'll have with you that they won't have at school. I have been there, and so I know what it's like for you. So when you have a look at this, this is what we started last year. We started giving informational sessions to the teachers, and I did 4 days of training last year, 2 for the K2 band and 2 for the 3-5 band, to get them introduced to the Common Core, let them know what it's about, let them start looking at certain pieces of it so that they could come back and work well with your children. So this year is where we are now. We are in the implementation transition year right now. So that means what? It means that the CRCT, which I'm sure you all know that little nice anagram there, CRCT, which is the criterion reference test that your child takes in April. And that test this year will be on Common Core standards, but it will not be a make or break year. It will not make or break your child failing a grade or something like that, because we are just learning this. Next year, there are field testing items. We will have a few on the test this year, they've said, which are constructive responses, and I'll talk a little bit about the assessments so that you could know what you might see coming home, because we need to prepare for this. So then we will have in 2014 and 2015, that's when the test kicks in, that's when it's going to count, that's when it's going to be full implementation of the Common Core. So all of the time from now till next year, to the beginning of 2014, are years for our teachers to learn, for you to adjust, for our children to adjust, and also for the teachers to adjust, never mind just learning. So, here is PARC. PARC is the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers. So the whole focus is on getting you up out of school into a job that suits you. So they have various what they call pathways in the high school, so that you can get to this kind of job by going this route, this route, and this route, or you can get to the same job by going to taking these subjects, that subject this way, and go another path to get there. So they're called pathways, and that's something that's going to be explained in the middle and high school. But for right now, we need to develop common assessments. So in other words, what they're trying to do is they're trying to develop, it gets complicated because naturally there's always going to be 2 organizations. One organization is PARC, which is what Georgia belongs to. Then there's another one called the Smarter Balance, which I always think sounds like margarine of some kind, but it's called the Smarter Balance. And so these 2 organizations are talking about making assessments and bringing them out and so on and so forth. But Georgia is following PARC, so you won't have a choice of which one you want to follow. Georgia is one of the foundational members of PARC, and so they are still working on these assessments. So right now, the assessments that we are doing, that I am designing in my group as the math for elementary, are all what we think the children should be able to do and how we interpret the standards. And we use the progressions that have been put out by the writers of the standards, and we try to interpret them the way we think, and then we try to teach our teachers the same thing. So it's all, at the moment, it's what we think it's going to be. So these will be ready during the 14-15 year. They were supposed to be online for everything. Now, when they first said that 2 years ago, I already knew, I don't think that's going to work, because you all know technology is not the same in every school. It's not up to date in every school, and you just think about all 45 states, every school system, every school, every child in 45 states. I couldn't see it happening. It was just, it was a behemoth. It just couldn't take place. So what we decided was, what they've now said is that they're going to give what they call constructive responses and performance tasks throughout the year, and then only at the end they will give them multiple choice, because the whole idea is to have a balanced assessment. And in the past, everything was always multiple choice. I'm sure you've seen it. You were probably raised on multiple choice yourself. It's easy to grade, it's done, but what it doesn't do is tell you where your child may or may not have an understanding. So So that is the issue with the multiple choice. So to try and counteract that, they are talking about constructed responses and performance tasks. So constructed response is usually a smaller piece. The children can get to it. It's probably got one finite answer. They get to it pretty much one way. We're asking them to explain their thinking, draw a picture, put some numbers in there, and that's a constructed response. And a performance task is usually a deeper piece, a lot more reading. It's got things that you've got to think about. You can solve it in multiple ways and still get the same answer. So those are the basic differences between those two. And those will be, what they're saying is that those would be done in the school, and they'd be trained on a particular rubric that they're going to have, and they would be done the whole year and throughout the year, and then only at the end would the multiple choice piece kick in, and they would then amalgamate those pieces during the year with the multiple choice and get an overall picture of how the child is doing. And if you think about it, there's a lot of children, my own child was one of them, when she took the SAT, she hated it because for her to sit there for 3 hours just working on one thing was stressful. But if she did pieces along the way, she was far more successful at it. So that's going to be for a lot of children. So that's how they're setting it up there. So now this is what you want to know. How is this going to affect my child? Well, there should be more math discussion. Right at the beginning of the year, I produced some videos for children. And it was a 3-minute, well, 2.5-minute little clip that your teachers may have shown you at open house if you had it, or they showed the children in the classroom, and it was like, this is what you're going to do, guys, and they're showing it to the children, and you're going to talk more, you're going to explain what your thinking's about, you're going to have more knowledge to how I let you discover some of the things, not just plain discovery, but leading along the way, giving them support. So this is what you're going to have. The various assessment types are the ones that I've just talked about. Multiple choice, constructed responses, and performance tasks. And the assessments that I am designing at the county level for your children to do are based on those 3 types. We are going to have multiple choice, constructed response, performance task, and the last 2, constructed response and performance tasks, are going to be graded with a rubric that I am going around training teachers on how to use when the schools ask me to come out, and we try to do it on quarter trainings to teach the teachers how it's done. But we need people to start looking at it as a rubric, through a rubric lens. We have what we call standards of mathematical practice. These are because, I don't know if any of you have heard of Stephen Covey, but he has something that's called the habits of mind. This is what these are supposed to be. There are 8 of them, and they are supposed to be around in a math lesson all the time. Not all 8 of them. There are 2 of them that should be present in every math lesson. That is attent to precision. In other words, try to figure out what you're getting for the answer and making it right. And the second one is persevering with the problem. Because we have a lot of children who start working on a problem and then say, I don't know how to do this, can you help me? They don't sit there and struggle through it. They want the answer now and they want it easily done. So therefore they don't learn how to think. The whole thing that we're going to be doing is changing their thinking to make them struggle with something. I mean, even I know I sometimes say, I don't really want to do this, and you just ask somebody, it's easier. So that's what we're trying to stop them doing. And so some of them will be in, 1 and 6 should be there all the time. Sometimes we have the others coming in and out depending on whatever it is that the teacher happens to be working on at that time. So the children have to communicate their thinking. So when your child comes home, and I'm sure you've had this, first of all, what did you do at school today? You get nothing. And then when you say, I know you did some math today, or how did you do this answer, they'll say to you, I don't know, I just knew it. Children don't know how they think. I mean, we've got to actually make children think in the first place. I think a lot of teenagers don't think at all. That's your experience. But in the elementary level, we're going to start early. We're going to make them think. And we're going to make them think in math and all of the other content areas that we can, so that we can get them going, so that they can look at their reading and they can think about the reading, they can comprehend what the text is saying. And that would be the same in math, or if it was in ELA, just to see what it is that I need to do. And so that's how you're going to support your child at home. The very first, actually, the most important one I didn't put at the top, and I should have. The most important one is ask for assistance. You are not expected to know what it is that the teachers are doing in the classroom at home underneath a system that is brand new. The only way you're going to know is to ask your teacher, please help me understand. I don't get what you're sending my child to do, because have you not had in your own experience, you'll go home with a math problem and the child will say, we need to do it this way, and a parent says, no, let me just show you the short way. It's quicker, it's easier, you can do it. And you may even be sitting there thinking, oops, that's me. But if you're not, and it's not you, that's good. Don't start it. Because we need to ask them to think about things differently. Doing that algorithm, because people say to me, well, are you saying that we don't do the old-fashioned algorithm? No, I'm not saying that. But what we're saying is that that's heading up to the 4th and 5th grade. In the K through 3, for sure, we are doing strategies. Let's think about numbers. Let's get number sense, because I already know that there's a lot of middle school children, for example, that will solve an algebra expression, not check what x is equal to with the original problem, which means that they don't know if it's reasonable. And half of this is talking about which way is it reasonable. Does it make sense to say that if you've got 15 things there, you're going to end up with 100 of them? It's not reasonable. So the whole piece about math then is going to be problem solving. So what might be different then is the idea of a timed test should be gone, especially when it's for a grade. Now I know, I get that every time, and I'll tell you why. Because your children are stressed out when it comes to that. And therefore, that causes them pain. And you're the parent, you are feeling their pain. So what we're trying to encourage, there are different ways of doing it. For example, I might give this child over here a stopwatch, and I'm going to say, okay, I want you to practice your 5 times, whatever it is. You pick the time that you want to do it in. You start your own clock. You see which ones you missed in that time, and you figure out a way, what strategy can we give you? What strategy can we work on that helps you learn that easier for you? Does that make sense? For example, a simple strategy, if you were saying, I'm just going to say 5 times 7. The 5 part's pretty easy because a child could go 5, 10, 15. But if they said 5 times 7 and they didn't know what it was, they might be able to go 10 times 7 and then cut it in half. Something like that. Does that make sense? Or they could break the 7 up. They might know that 5 times 5 is 25 and 5 times 2 is 10 and 25 plus 10 is 35. It's a very easy way of doing it. Those are all strategies. Do you see what I'm trying to get at? That's what we're asking our teachers to do. But you'll have to cut them a bit of slack. They've had years of not only giving time tests, but probably like you, suffered under regime of time tests. So how do we expect them to just snap out of it in the 2nd month of school? It's not going to happen. But I know Patrice is working really hard on that, and so is the rest of the county, to start saying, let's look at strategies, what can we do, let's give you some training. So it will take time for them. And they're under the gun too, and they're very worried about the asking for assistance has a two-way street. The communication between you and the teacher has to be good. Now, for some teachers, for some parents, you don't want to be the one that says, oh, if I go and ask her, I'm going to be that parent. And then on the other hand, the teacher doesn't want to look at the parents and say, uh-oh, it's always going to be trouble when I see this person. So there's a lot of intimidation on both sides. And I'm talking not bullet in particular, I'm talking all over. So even me as an educator, I used to have that feeling when I had to talk to something about with my child's teacher when they were young. So you just have to be everybody's going to have to push through that. And over time, we're going to develop this good communication piece. So when you're asking, it doesn't mean that you're actually questioning what they're doing. You're just trying to understand for you to help your child. So we all have to do that. So that's the main thing about point number 1. We don't want to make them go to the algorithm when they're in 2nd grade, when they're learning how to add and subtract. We really need them to use strategies. For example, counting on when they start off that in 1st grade. Doubles plus 1 might be a way of doing it, and I'm going to give you an example of something that you might see coming home. And here it is. I love doing this problem because I showed it in a 2nd grade classroom last year with a group of children. And I said to them, all right, I need you, this is what we call number talks, and there's certain things that happen. The children put their hand up on their chest when they think they have an answer, so there's no speaking, which means that me, who's intimidated by Charlie here, who always puts his hand up quickly, who's always got the answer right. He can't see what I'm doing, nor can I see what he's doing, but the teacher can see everybody. So when she finally gets an answer, and I asked this child an answer, and he said to me, well, I asked him to explain his answer. And he said, well, the first problem is that you wrote it wrong. So I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, I don't actually see anything wrong with that one. And he said, you should have taken the second number and put it underneath the first one. And then what did I already know? That poor little chap has been trained in second grade, do the algorithm, where you will then say 9 plus 7 is something and carry 1. And that's part of the issues that we have. We start talking about this in elementary, in the early grades, and we say, okay, so what they should be looking at are the tens. This is place value. I would say 60 plus 40. A lot of people would say, what's 6 plus 4? Well, 6 plus 4 is 10. So I don't understand why you're telling me 6 plus 4 is 100. We just understand that, but the kids don't. So we start teaching you all about place value, and then we start talking about it in a different language. So we can understand why our children are confused. So this is something that could happen in a classroom. We're asking the kids, how could I do this? And I'm actually going to use place value today. So they would say, well, 40 plus 60 is 100, and I can pull that easily. There's lots of ways to solve this. And then they could say 1 plus 9, because it's easy for me to make a 10. So I'm going to take the 1 from the 7, and I'm going to make a 10, which leaves me with 6. Some of you are looking at that and thinking, heck, mentally I'm putting 47, 69, I'm drawing a little line and so on, but when you're in the grocery store, is that really what you're doing? Do you hold out a piece of paper and write it down like that? I don't think so. You do some kind of mental strategy, you just don't realize that's what you're doing. So another way of looking at that problem could have been, a child could take 1 from the 47 and 70. Does everybody see that?
Yeah.
And then 70 plus 46, I can get to 160. Does that make sense? Some of you may be looking at that and think, I did it completely differently. And that's good, because if you did, that's what our children are doing. So we are trying to elicit a child's way of doing something from them in the classroom while they're there. So now that you've looked at that, you thought, okay, I got that one. That's easy enough. I can handle that one at home. Let me show you this one. This is a subtraction problem. But we told, I do this with the teachers all the time. I love it because I say to them, the condition of this one is you have to draw a number line. This is just training the teacher. So sometimes we can tell the children that we'll do this, but on the whole, in the end, all of this stuff is done mentally. The children sit on the floor in front of you, there's no paper, there's no pencil, and these kids can do it. They can do it. If they can handle the iPad and download an app and play a game, they can handle it. So, here's what a teacher did. She said, I said 38 is uncomfortable to deal with. So I made it 40, because then I know that from 40 to 61 is 21. And then I added 2 to get to 40, so that makes it 23. And some of you are looking at that thinking, yep, that makes sense to me. Some of you are looking at it thinking, haven't got a clue, because I was never taught this way. Which is exactly where we're going to be with our teachers. At first, when they look at this, and it's really intimidating, because I have the whole faculty here, I have a piece of chart paper, and then I ask them to share their thinking. But I try to make it non-stressful for them, because what the real thing about this is that everybody thinks differently. So here's that. The one thing that really has attracted me about all my years of living in the United States is how much choice you have. You can choose this, you can do that, you can make your own decision about that, except in school. It's like, do it the same way, heard, otherwise we're all going to be wrong. Have you ever thought about the anomaly of that? We need to have where we've got that way of thinking, as long as you can explain your thinking. The middle school experience that we would have had would have been, if you don't show me all the working and get the right answer, you get the whole problem wrong. Or if you show me the working and then you just made a slight answer at the end, you also get the whole problem wrong. Then you get the person who says, I'm more interested in looking at the working of it, and if you've got the answer wrong, let's figure out what went wrong. But those were few and far between in my lifetime. Middle school lifetime, that is. So now when you look at that one, you can see that it's it's more complicated with 444, subtract 298, because the first one, everybody thinks, oh, I can handle that one, it's easy, until you hit them with this one. So this particular problem over here at 444, that will end up being a third grade problem in the end. Third grade. So they would need to be proficient by the end of third grade, so that when they go into fourth grade, we don't have to worry about teaching adding and subtracting. We should not be spending very long on it in third grade, because we want them to be able to figure out a strategy, and then eventually the algorithm will come through. But there won't be any more of this borrow a 10. I've heard that. You must have heard that, because some of you are not just out of high school. Borrow a 10? When did you intend returning it? So the language is confusing. So we don't say that anymore. So then we talked about trading it out for something else or exchanging it, so that made a lot more sense for children. But until they start working a lot with the base 10s, they don't quite get that. So those are three examples that you might see happening in your child's classroom from second grade. We do a lot of these. I'm going to a school tomorrow where I'm going to work with a first grade class and a second grade class to start looking at how you can talk about these things. So we're starting down here. So what's going to happen is that if you're a kindergarten parent in this room, you are in a pound seat right now, because they are starting all of this and you've got it. Where it is a little bit more frightening is for those parents who have got children that are older than kindergarten, that are maybe fourth grade or fifth grade, and have missed a lot of these things. But we will be working with them in the schools so that your children will be able to go to middle school having a mental way of trying to solve something if they've got stuck on an algorithm. That's pretty much my message. So then I thought that it might be good if you had a few questions, or if you wanted to ask anything, we'd be happy to help. And Patrice, any other question that you might have that's not related to this, I know Patrice's.
Well, I'll tell you real quick, how are we going to be impacted here at Bullard? What are we doing to get our teachers ready to be able to move forward with this? And one of the things we knew, like I told you last time, that math was definitely going to be one of our big goals this year. We're going to work on math. The teachers are working on creating common assessments. We're working in teams, grade level teams to do that. Leadership team has been digging around trying to find different ideas from different places, so they know how to use their resources. They're going online, they're looking. They know that kids are struggling with constructive response, struggling a little bit with performance tasks. They do really well with multiple choice, and we can see that when we look at our test scores. But really, do our kids understand math? Do they have a number sense? And we're finding that they don't. So teachers are working hard on doing that, and they're doing it in teams together. We just wrote for Title II funding to be able to get additional funds to buy the Number Talks book that Margaret talked about. We have 12 of them here now for checkout. It's fantastic, fantastic resource for getting kids to really understand numbers. And so we wrote to have enough, get funds to be able to purchase them for every teacher to have it. So hopefully next week we'll get word that we've gotten that funding, hopefully. And then we'll pull Margaret in to do some training with teachers for that resource specifically. And then the same is true in ELA. We've written for additional funds to be able to have teachers to get together and write standards, assessments that are standards-based, that require more thought for kids. Pulling away a time test is very difficult. I'll say I was in classes last week. I saw combinations of this. That first problem at the slide before that, saw it happen in the second grade class last Monday. So know that it is happening, but we still have that old school mentality mixed in there where that's what we know. We know spelling tests every Friday. You expect that. But then we look at our writing scores and our students aren't performing because they can do it. When I number my paper 1 to 25 and you call the word, but I'm not putting it in the writing. And that's where we're seeing some of those discrepancies. So we're working with teachers so that they know, what else do I do then? If I can't do it this way, then how do I grade spelling? Because in 4th and 5th grade, it's on the report card. First, K through 3, it's on there, but it's on there as a standard, so we know we're doing it meshed within our writing. So we're needing to give teachers those tools, and so we're continuously doing that. We will have some release time. You know, the best thing is not having subs in a class, but teachers need the time to be able to train and to be able to write lessons that are standards-based. And so we will be working on providing them at that time this year. We don't have our early release days anymore to be able to do that. So we'll have to do it during school. We'll use our November 6th, the election day, is a staff development day for us. So we'll be here, and then we'll have some teachers going out to get some more math support, language support, and then we'll bring in to do some training here. And give them that time to plan lessons as well. So we said a lot. So it's a huge mouthful, I know. So I want to open it up for questions.
So in the traditional way, we have that 1 week of, CRCT testing, standardized testing. Is that now out the window?
No, we will still have the CRCT this year,
Okay.
and it still is a
Is it
gateway.
phased out?
It's still a gateway for 3rd and 5th. The difference is that there are Common Core questions on there, and they're going to disaggregate that data at the
So
testing
this style
level.
of teaching and this style of testing will slowly be integrated. You'll still have, you're saying that you're going to teach over time, but there's about weeks. You're saying it still extends into the school year. You're still having
The
in
CRCT
spring.
test.
You're still having more assessing. You're still having more.
We'll have the CRCT in the spring, like we've always done.
We'll have the writing
But when
assessments.
we do, the writing assessments, but when we do like a constructed response from the park organization, that will be done maybe in the middle of the year. And then that's all held, and then they amalgamate that as to be with the multiple choice. And the multiple choice will have some of the constructed responses on that particular test that the children will answer online, if that's how it comes about.
And when they're testing something like the math,
Now,
the answer needs to be the answer, period, no matter which style they're thinking. If they're doing the number line, if they're doing tens, borrowing stuff. So you're just looking for an answer that's correct. You're not caring at that point how they got there?
no, we are.
Okay.
So what's happening is that so when we have the rubric, so when I grade you according to the rubric, I look at what you've written, how you've done that.
So you want to
And-
show work, you want the kids.
Yes,
Some
and
kids
each
are-
piece of
that they are
it.
thinking and not on paper thinking,
Exactly, and that's what we've got to transfer. So the rubric is set up so that there'll be something about representation, something about strategies, and something about a correct answer. And each of those pieces have got a score. Yes. Each of those pieces have a score. So you might get a great score, 3, for example. Your representation was awesome. Your strategy was fabulous, but you got the wrong answer. So that ended up in a
there's
1.
still credit for trying.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, it's not
yes.
just-
Because that's why we have to use a rubric. And the
That's
other
why.
part of the rubric is that we have to train the teachers on
This
what
is
does
a
it mean
far-out
to
bar.
you.
Yes.
And then we have to take that same rubric and I sit with a class of children and say, let's look at this rubric, guys, because how can I measure you on a rubric that you've never even seen?
So train the teachers to teach them in the class.
And
then
the children, then the teachers train the kids. Let's look at what's expected of you on this particular rubric. Now, next week when I give you something to do, here's the rubric right next to you, and you will solve it according to what you've learned, we understand by our rubric.
And then your staff or your department is in charge of doing the checks and balances to make sure the teachers are getting this right? Or you're looking at the end result and saying, okay, this grade,
No.
this teacher didn't,
We're not-
the concept wasn't there, or how do you?
We're not
check
doing the end
process?
results, and we're not examining each teacher.
Okay.
Here's just a point of reference. At my level for math, I have 3,500 teachers. I wouldn't be able to do my
So how
job.
do you know that you?
So what's going to happen is that they're going to, in the school, they're going to decide what it is. The principal has a huge autonomy on this one. Plus the fact, which the first argument comes up, but it's so subjective. Yes, it is. So when we get together, we're advocating collaborative scoring, which I know is what Diana talks about.
I like
So
that.
I would take my kids' papers and I hand them to this teacher. She doesn't give hers to me, because now we've got this,
Yes,
if I
it's
grade
okay.
hers,
Yeah.
so then she gives hers to somebody else on the team, and then we become
It's like the classroom,
objective.
you pass it to the next neighbor or anything.
But it's not about the kids.
And we're working on that as a school this year. So that's
It's a lot of learning.
a lot.
It's a lot.
of
And you said it takes about 3 years, like when you said your guideline for 2014, so it actually is going to be counted for a nationwide report.
And that's about when the assessment will be ready to be scored that way at that week of CRCT testing. Because right now, it's still going to be the way it is. So we're teaching teachers to do their common grade level assessments and the assessments they're taking on in their classes in this format, with the constructive response, having performance tasks, and then the combination of some multiple choice.
I guess my question is regarding fifth graders right now, prior fifth graders, they can use some of the CRCT, when you talk about some graders. How's that going to fall out?
It won't, they'll still be taking it the way that they've taken it before is still be the same as multiple choice. They're not going to have any construction.
You're saying it's not like a passive drill.
It is a gateway. But I think what Margaret was saying here is that there are going to be Common Core standards embedded in the test, but given in that multiple choice format. So when they pull that data and do the disaggregation to determine whether a child has met the criteria to move on, that's where the decision will be made about what percentage of it was Common Core, what percentage of it was still
Right.
GPS.
What you normally do on the CRCT is they give more questions than are actually graded. So you get 70 questions, but only 60 of them count. We never know which 60 are counting. So that's where those questions from Common Core will not affect a child going into the 6th grade or remaining in the 5th grade.
But they'll still need that cutoff score of 800 to be considered passing, yes. And right now, as far as we know, it's still 800. That's not changed.
It's multifaceted, this whole thing, because on top of this, you get commentary by the teachers. The days of the smiley face, good job, well done, finished, gone.
Those are stars.
Those are gone. They need to be saying things, which they will do over time. You have met the standard by. I was in a classroom yesterday where a teacher was working with 2nd grade kids. And the children have it there. You met the standard when you, and they were able to evaluate each other's work when they worked together. It was awesome to see. So it's just a matter of training, but we need to get people on the road with it, and we need to allow them that learning period, because it's very hard to come back to school in August and be hit with all of this, because this is not just math and ELA that they're doing. Sometimes, they're dealing with stuff that they need to do for the school. They're writing assessments that they just started learning about what the standards are. They deal with parents. They deal with the children's problems. They're semi-counselors. They're bookkeepers. They do all sorts of things. So we're trying to just let them. It's overwhelming for the teacher as well.
But something I want to ask, for the teacher's perspective, I know in the past, like for instance, my sister supply taught at middle school, and that math teacher had to teach this skill on this day, the next skill on the next day, and the kids weren't necessarily ready for that yet. The teachers have the flexibility to be able to do what they need to do so the kids can learn what they need to learn.
It's very much condensed. So before, when we had 1,000 standards to do in 175 days, it's much less, because the expectation is that we're going to take students deeper with their knowledge level, so we have more time on it. And then the way that it's been spiraled, which stands Cobb out a little different from the state, and that's kind of where teachers are struggling a little bit trying to find support, is that we've spiraled the curriculum in math so that it makes sense and it makes better connections for kids. So before we bounce off to something way over here and then have to come back around, the spiral is neater and tighter. It makes more sense. We're now working on pulling resources that match the Cobb spiral, because it does look different than the state.
And I pull the stuff from the state. So everything that the teachers have from the state, if they went on the state level, I pull it down. I break it up and I say, this particular piece, that goes in quarter 1. This is a great thing. We'll put it in quarter 3 so that they don't have to spend their time looking, because they may have to read a 150-page document before they figure out where the pieces go. And so I don't expect them to do that. They can't. They haven't got the time. They're overworked as it is. So that's a very important question. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm concerned, I have 2 second graders. I'm concerned that they're in the middle of this. They're not starting early. They're not starting, or like my 4th grader, he's going to be done. So I feel like they're sort of getting shortchanged a little bit, because this program's starting, and it counts when they're 5th graders.
You'll be surprised. I don't think it will, because when they do the number talks like Patrice is talking about, they are like this. They are like that. And that gives them the strategies. They'll get the strategies in 3rd grade for sure for adding and subtracting, because that's where it's taught. They will also get taught how to write a performance style or an extended response, and how to do a constructive response in writing, because as you pointed out over here, children don't know how to articulate what they are thinking. They can sometimes do it verbally, so then sometimes we scaffold that help. In kindergarten, we write it for them. In 1st grade, if children are having difficulty, I write the first 3 sentences and I ask you to finish the last 2. So we can scaffold them up, and if every teacher is consistent, which is what's going to start happening, you will find that it will just carry on from the various grade levels and your children will be all right.
So my boys are not going to be learning how to read root this year. They're not going to learn.
In second grade?
Yes.
Yes, they are. It's just, they won't learn the algorithm.
They're not going to learn to borrow. They're not going to learn to
They're
put
not that
underneath,
language.
slash it, turn it to a 9, like, you know, if it's.
They can start thinking about it towards the end of it, but initially we're going to start saying, let's look at how we can break this up. And you'd be surprised that your two boys will be able to add those numbers in their heads. And how can you support that? You give them a problem in the car.
Without pen and paper.
Without pen and paper. And don't make it difficult to start off with. And what some of our teachers are going to do with the number talks in second grade, she may start off with some of the stuff that we do in first grade and just move them quicker. Because number talks is a 5-minute piece early in the morning or whenever, the beginning of the math period. It's not a whole lesson. It's quick, sharp, done. Which is why you can do it in the
more
car.
valuable when they're raised at such a younger age. We're stuck with what we know, and it's like, we're so rigid about doing it this way. They're going to have a little more flexibility to be able
I
to
think
learn.
you'll be
That's
pleasantly surprised.
I guess that's my question. Are there resources for the parents so we can learn?
Yeah.
I mean, I pretty much understand what you say, but I have a PhD, and, I don't fully understand, your methods. And I know my wife, who has higher degrees, is going to want to know
What is this?
exactly how this works so she can sit down with our son, who's in kindergarten now, and, we can do his homework with him.
That is our plan, is to have some curriculum nights this year specifically for that. So a math night, a language arts night, writing.
If you want a parent number talk night, I'll do that for you.
Yeah, I'd like that. And also, I think if there's is the state or the organization behind this collaborative effort going to, give a manual that explains how this works and shows the testing and the methods that you talked about for the constructive tests, et cetera, so that we can fully understand it?
Well, here's what's going to happen. I'm making a bank of questions that teachers can give in the classroom, so that when they do a constructive response, is what I'm starting off with, they could do some constructive responses in the classroom, they can do the rubric, they can talk about it with you, because I think the whole point is communication with the children and the parents themselves, so that everybody can relax, and you'll see that it's the same kind of math that we've always been doing. It's just how we're presenting it.
Sure.
Talking about it more instead of just getting that answer in English.
I appreciate that, but my son's teacher has like 22 or 25 kids, and my son has stuff to do every day, and she's not going to have time to talk to 25 different parents to explain this problem we did. That's why I'm wondering
Right
if
now,
we can
there
have
there
access
is the
to some of the
website.
materials.
You can get to the Common Core parent part of it from the district site, and I think we put a link on our website as well. So keep checking that for updates.
And that will have that
Right now,
information?
it gives you can go see what the standards are, and you can see some examples. I don't believe it's as detailed in terms of assessment yet, because I think they're still working through that. But there are those parent resources there to at least give you an idea of what your child is expected to
And-
know how to do.
Is the district aware that, I've got tons of computers, but none of that stuff appears on an iPad. If you go to those links for parents who use those things,
Yes, the drop
they
down
don't work.
there's an issue. Yes,
Yeah,
they
don't
are
work.
aware of that, and they're trying to work through, they're reformatting, which is why we've had so many issues with our own website. It's not, our website not updating is because they're trying to reformat the page so that it'll work on it, because it just stopped all of a sudden working on iPads. So they are working on that. Yes, ma'am.
In the third grade text, you showed us the difference between whole days.
Yeah.
Obviously, giant.
Where does one get that? It's called number talks.
How is that impacting my close family as a child?
Sure.
Right.
This will
For CRCT, my guess is that right now, I believe it is going to be the combination of some Common Core text. And they always, on the CRCT, they do the field test items that are off grade level, some that are on, some that have pieces that are field tested, but it's going to be a combination. So they're going to see some complex text that is going to be expected. And you've got one that's got pass both reading and math to the day.
That's the whole department of
That you should be able to find on the website. There is a list of text like, I think that second and third grade is not necessarily at all. So there's the list of what topics, what text you should be able to see in each grade level, and then you could take some of that, do some homework with it.
You see what I'm saying?
It's young and simple, it's no way my son's office is it's black or it's white. The sun is touching the ground, he's literally picturing falling to the earth. That poetic verse of sky is blue and the ocean is your, you know, it's like that's just way. So I'm wondering where these special needs kids guys either with certain literacy stories are going to fall. So that's just a learning thing on your end. You know, math is black and white, easy answer you to your answer, but reading is an inference issue, and then, like, either through dyslexia or through autism, like, it's not open mind. They make these.
I do have a question about, back to what Kathy was saying with the CRCT. Is that going to be phased out then in several years? It seems like we're doing more assessments.
No, it will be called CRCT. It will still be multiple choice, but it will be added to the performance tasks and other stuff that's happened through the year.
So it'll be combined within
Yes.
3 years?
Yes,
Okay.
it's amalgamated into one
Gotcha.
score, so to speak, whatever they call it, 800 or whatever.
Okay,
However
okay.
the state decides.
I was just unclear on that.
It
Okay.
is going to be combined?
Yes,
To be-
that's what the plan is.
And those constructive response and performance tasks will be standardized. So it won't be what our teachers create versus what Fry teachers create. The state will create it and will be administering it.
And is it transferable, like say my sister just came from Florida, so her FCAT scores versus the CRCT scores, would this phase out eventually in 2004? So in the future, would it all be cohesive that
That's
what
my
they
understanding.
expect for those math standards we
National.
taught will
It
be
should
on
be
par with each
national.
state?
Yes.
That's the goal.
That's
For those states that are under par. Right.
They don't have their own
Other states-
Okay.
Well, Texas and California will probably always be on their own, but the other states under smarter balance will also have their pieces. That makes sense.
Okay.
But you've got 45 states to move to that should have.
A cohesive,
Yes.
there's going to be some similarities in their styles, and it won't be shocked.
Don't go to California, Texas.
This state here?
Our plan, yes, our plan would still be to continue the additional support, meeting their goals and objectives for their IEP. But what we're doing is we're looking at those goals and objectives is making sure they match the Common Core standards as well. So it's not, we're not looking at the old GPS except for science, social studies, and health, we still are doing that. For ELA and math, that's the connection that we have. So that we're still meeting their individual.
Yeah, is ELA English language
English
arts? or-
language arts.
It is,
Yes.
okay, I wasn't sure if it's elementary language arts. I was stuck on the
Sorry.
E2.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
bounce and
you guys are so
all the
like,
time.
yeah,
I'm
the
so
ETA
sorry.
of the people.
Actually,
Yes.
it's very good for you to say that. I must remember that next parent meeting.
Yeah. English or elementary?
What's up? The Georgia Performance Standards.
Oh, okay, there you go.
So that, if I can explain that, that's very confusing too, because on the website, the DOE website, they call it the
Department of Education.
They call it CCGPS, and what that means is Common Core Georgia Performance Standard. It doesn't mean it's the stuff from last year when they called it GPS and it was those other standards. They just wanted to keep Georgia Performance Standards in the title because out in the other states, the Common Core is called CCSS, Common Core State Standards. It's just Georgia decided to add.
Oh.
Yes, ma'am.
Does Fuller have a parent mentor program or a parent volunteer classroom?
Like a class? No.
I'm wondering if something like that would be helpful as the teachers try and find time to develop the curriculum. And we can come in and sit down with the kids for an hour and, help them learn whatever the case is.
Yeah, we're working through some different ways of trying to get the teachers to have the time to be able to do just that. Because, we don't, like I said, early release days are gone. We don't have coaches in the school that can go and, work with teachers. We really do have to be creative. So absolutely. We're looking for creative ways. That's not that.
In your next leadership meeting, could we ask maybe that some of the teachers put on their blog, like when they introduce a new concept like this, if they put on their blog how they're teaching the students to do that particular standard, then if we knew to go to their blog, it would be a one, and then to his point, everybody wouldn't be calling the teacher saying, we want to make sure we're teaching or helping our kids do this the way you want us to. Because I have a second grader who's already telling me, I am not doing this right, Mom.
And we can do it on the methodology.
I'm not doing it right. You did not write that.
Yeah, I forgot about that to say that we've been working on updating our blogs here, but the district also has blogs. So that's something else we need to get out there to parents.
Oh, okay.
There is a math blog that Margaret's department updates.
Okay.
And so adding that would be
Yeah, we can add that to our blog too.
Good suggestions.
In terms of report cards and that sort of thing, that's all staying the same, 1, 2, 3s up till third grade?
K-3.
And,
Yes.
okay, so that's all staying the same?
And
just
they've
the-
updated to match the Common Core
Right, just the
standards.
standards.
Yes. Yep.
In the long run, or intermediate run, there's still things, going to be things like, I have a history test today, or I have a math test today, or and
In
this
the-
overlaid on that, or does that system change as well?
No, in the elementary level, what's going to happen is that there will be a time when there will be a social studies, sorry. Social studies piece that they just need for content. But in an ELA piece, they could have done a writing or a response to a writing that's all about an historical event. So it's interlaced with it. So it's totally integrated that way. When we're talking in the math, we're trying to do things like, what is the author of this problem saying? Even if there were 5 bunnies, some more came, and now there are 17. What is the author saying here? What is the phrase mean? What does some more mean? So we're trying to do similar things within the ELA piece. But in science, there'll be a lab, say, at some point, and they would get some kind of score on the actual content. But if they read about it in an ELA piece, they could be asking questions from an ELA point of view on a science topic. So it's kind of an amalgamation of those two.
You have 5 different kids though, and 5 different kids arrive at that math problem in 5 different ways.
Yep.
They will
That's
score
totally fine.
based
Oh,
on that.
totally
You
fine.
don't care how they get there as long as they can explain it and the
Right,
answers.
and here's an interesting thing. This is a caveat to some of those kids, because you've got kids in the classroom doing this who will get like so overly creative that it's terribly convoluted, and they're very proud of it, and everybody else is like, oh, I don't know what you're doing. So what we do then with that is we say to them, that was really well done, and I like your thinking, but would it be very efficient for you? So we try to rein them in. It's not that we want to stop their thinking, and we want you to have different ways of thinking. But if you go totally way out there, it's not really going to help you if that was a strategy that you're trying to use in a testing situation or in a problem-solving situation. Because what we're really doing with these things is enabling them to work with people as they go up the chain. And not everybody, if you've got a child who's very smart but can't explain themselves, they usually don't work with anybody. And then on the other hand, you've got children who don't necessarily need to be a top math brain, but can follow the thinking and have a great idea of their own to intersperse with it. So we want to hit all of our children, not just focus on the ones who are having trouble or the ones who are doing very well.
And what that looks like when I was in that second grade class last week, she was doing 2 strategies and gave the kids choice for which strategy was most comfortable with them right now to be able to solve the couple of problems they were solving. And then they had to flip-flop. Now use the one that you're not that comfortable with. And then she was working individually with students who needed the support from her as they were working through them. So the teachers are breaking it down and not just dumping all the strategies at one time, that they're being very specific and purposeful with their instruction each week to give kids. We want to give them their own little tool bag so that when they have to go solve on their own, they're able to do it and they can pull the pieces that make the most sense to them or that they're comfortable with. Other questions? I know it's a lot. It is a lot. I know it's scary. We are working hard. Back to another question. Someone asked earlier about the accountability part of it. When we begin doing our formal observations, we do observations of teachers every year as part of, they have So when it's time to come, coming in, I'm looking for this. They have an instrument that's very specific with the things that I should see every time I'm in a classroom and for every lesson. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the use of some of the strategies that our kids need. I'm looking to make sure the standard is really being addressed in a classroom. When I look at their lesson plans, I look at them every week. We do our lesson plans online, so I'll pull them up on my iPad and go into a class. Both Bonnie and I do that. And we're looking for that. Is there a connection? Why are we still doing a time test if kids need to be able to, break numbers down? And so that's what we're looking for every time we're going in classes. And when we don't see it, we're working with teachers, we're having these conversations. So that's the accountability piece right now, is this at our local level. And we're looking to that. Others? That was awesome. Thank you so much for coming this morning. As questions pop up, Margaret takes emails, and can you tell how to take blog?
Yeah, I don't have those. I'll have to email that to you. I don't have okay. But, yeah.
And then I'll post it. Once she sends it to me, I'll post it on our website.
Yes, that's what. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.